Thank you very much. So we are very much set to receive our facilitator this afternoon. So, Madam, please go ahead to share your screen now. Your PowerPoint presentation.
All right, so thank you for having me. I appreciate the invite. Special thanks to Wale for pretty much chasing me down, but I'm glad to be here. I'm excited to be here. One thing, please confirm you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes, you can now. Thank you.
Okay, so one thing that might help during the question and answer might be for you to get a bit closer, because I struggle a bit with hearing the conversations in the room. And so it might be a bit challenging when I start to take questions and answers. So, but that said, I'll go into the actual presentation, and I'll share my screen in a bit. So there's a bit of an unfairness here, because you probably have seen me spotlighted over there, but I can't see the room, but it's fine. I'll go ahead and have the conversation and see, you know, if before we complete it, I'm able to see the expressions in the room. But it's a virtual world, and we have to get used to, you know, technology and whatever technology brings our way. So that said, give me a minute to start to share my screen, and I'll share in a bit now. So. All right. Please let me know when you can see my screen. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so I hear a yes from the virtual, but I don't know if you can see in the room, because there's a bit of a hesitation.
Okay, we can't see your screen in the room.
You cannot?
Yes.
All right.
Okay. I think it's because of your video. So we'll project it. Can go ahead with your presentation. We'll project the slides from here. Just go ahead with the presentation.
All right. Okay, so I want to put it in slide share mode for the benefits of those that are online. And so thank you once again. Thank you for being here. I am working from home, so hence the nice looking background and all. So that's not to say that my office background is not as nice. It's just that, you know, it feels cozy because I'm working from home. And so it's really a pleasure to be here. I have 25 minutes to do this. And like I got snippets, you know, of some of the conversations when the sponsor was talking, but I didn't catch everything. But one of them was, you know, the need to keep learning. And, you know, Lunch and Learns, I've always found them very interesting because, you know, it's learning in a relaxed atmosphere, but it contributes to the overall body of knowledge that comes from, you know, as a person, you know, we pick it here and there. And as long as we can put it to good use to impact the way we do our work, you know, it's always a benefit. So I would encourage you that, you know, subsequent ones, you know, that you are also available and you take advantage of this benefit. So today, you know, my screen, the title on screen is reads slightly different from the overall title, but it's the same message. I just wanted to emphasize a few things. So we said it's strategic and systemic. So strategic approach to digital innovation in the energy industry. That's what the theme is. But, you know, I've added and systemic approach without us thinking about the systemic impacts in addition to the strategic implications of digital. And also because my background is in the hydrocarbon part, you know, some of the context is going to be coming from that. But, you know, I said to Wale recently that, you know, the information shared here is relevant to every aspect of the industry and even of the energy industry and even any industry for that matter. And at the end of the day, the key messaging is how do we link technology adoption to value creation? And so I have a few slides and I do have 20 odd minutes to talk through. But I'm hoping that we can have, you know, a candid, relaxed conversation. Confirm you still hear me loud and clear in the room?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you.
Okay,
yes,
thanks.
ma'am.
All right, so I'll move on with the presentation then. So quick outline for what this presentation looks like, you know. I know that you kind of read my bio earlier, but just for completeness, I have another slide to just say, meet Fumilola Asa. I like to talk about myself. But beyond that, we'll talk about the hydrocarbon value chain. And then I dive into digital innovation and what is it doing for us in industry generally and the energy industry. And then I start to talk about strategy, what's the strategic view to digital? Why is it important that we look strategically at digital adoption? And then I do a bit of a quick introduction to systems thinking and engineering, and then think about how that applies to the energy industry and technology adoption within the industry. And then I kind of start to wrap it up by saying what's in it for the aspiring digital industry professional, either for somebody who started in the industry, who's thinking about digital, or somebody who is planning to go into the industry. And then just some final thoughts to sort of wrap it up around the key messages that I look to share today. And so with that, I'll go into it. So like I said, I was going to talk about, just meet me. And it was more from a perspective of, okay, so who are you and why are you speaking about digital and why should we even listen to you? And so in the introduction, James already mentioned sort of my academic background. I'm a serial learner. So this is not show off. This is just me thinking about, some of my learnings that are relevant to this conversation. And, I'm a magnet for knowledge. I just like to, learn and learn and learn. And as much as possible, also impact that learning in any way that I can. And so, I currently started a Doctor of Business Administration program. I get to be called a doctor, right? when I'm done after a couple of years' time. But part of that is to look at system thinking, in the perspective of corporate foresight. How can we better plan, especially in an industry like ours that's experiencing so many changes, but my initial degree is mechanical engineering. So yes, I'm a mechanical engineer. And then my professional affiliations are here. I'm a member of the Nigerian Society of Engineers, registered engineer with Koran. I have a project management professional certification. I've had that for a couple of years, but very recently got a certification in product management from the Scaled Agile framework. And of course, as mentioned earlier, I have a personal website. Early this year, I realized that there's so much I could share from my experience, my learnings to people on a broader scale. And so I have an insights blog on my personal website where I kind of talk about things like strategy, things about, systems in practical terms, applying it to life and so many. And that's why being in a seminar, in a webinar like this is important, regardless of if your core is in the energy industry or somewhere else, because the nuggets are important anyways. And so within the industry, I've been in roles like facilities engineering, process engineering, operations support. And then I've done a lot of project management roles. So project controls, project assurance, project risk, organizational capability, which is pretty much, development, people development within my facilities engineering function. And then, I do a lot of facilitation of strategy sessions, helping people think through their strategy. And then ultimately in my current role, I'm working in digital and strategy. So as a leading performance/digital advisor in Chevron Nigeria. Now that said, I always like to put this disclaimer here. I do not speak for Chevron. I'm not authorized to speak on behalf of Chevron. And so I'm sharing my perspective, of course, based on my experience working, over these years. And as such, I also cannot answer direct questions on Chevron strategy. So just wanted to put that out there before we kind of dive into the rest of the conversation. All right, so that's me. And so I come from a perspective of industry knowledge, engineering in the industry. As a facilities engineer, I relate with the petroleum engineers, the drilling engineers, with the planning folks, with operations. And so I kind of see a perspective of the business. And I've realized that, as I think through that, I realized that a strategy, a system thinking, the linkages between things are very important if you must make the most of any deployments, especially digital. So what I have on the screen, so we're going into the main conversation. And so what I have on the screen is, it's called, the original slide has oil and gas distribution chain. And I know it's an energy conversation, right? So most people are somewhat aware or familiar with parts of that, chain. But I try to call it out as value, because at the end of the day, there's opportunities to add value over the chain of the hydrocarbon industry. It's a very complex one, the production, the transportation, refining, there's transmission, storage, distribution, but it's a value chain because there's value everywhere along that chain. And the decisions you make at certain stages in that chain can impact the value you get at the end, especially to the final customer, either in the way you make your work easier to do, or you're able to make better decisions, or you can produce better. But there's opportunities out there, upstream, midstream, downstream. And so this is to set the tone that whatever I'm talking about today applies, in upstream, midstream, downstream. And so, like I said, I wanted to use a hydrocarbon background because that's where my background is in. All right. So now that said, set the background, and maybe I might be preaching to the choir. Maybe most of you already know the chain, but it's important for emphasis because everywhere in that chain is an opportunity for digital impact. And so before I kind of continue, I kind of see my eyes moving, left and right. I'm not crossed eyes. I have a big screen on the other side. And so sometimes I kind of zoom in to see exactly what I have on the screen. Okay, so now I'll keep going because you're here to talk about digital, a strategic view to digital. And so when we talk about digital, it's like one of the buzzwords right now. Everywhere you turn to is digital, in our personal life, in work, everywhere we talk about digital. And, it's pretty much, the innovation. What does it really mean? And at the end of the day, it's around, applying digital technology in whatever form it is. So for example, we're having this conversation, it almost feels like I'm in the room with you because of digital. And so digital innovation really is applying digital technology to enhance your processes or your operations. That really, regardless of any other definition, is what digital innovation is. And one thing that, has become more important about digital as it pertains to industry professionals is that it is changing how we do business. A long time, some years ago, that felt very strange to kind of have this conversation, probably with me spotlighted on the screen there, and having a conversation like I'm in there, and there's even new things coming, all the metaverse and all of that. And so we kind of see what that would do to our business. But even as it is today, in what is being called Industry 4.0, the impact, the cyber physical impacts of digital. So we've gone from mechanization to automation and all of the mass productions, all the previous, innovation. But right now, digital is changing how we do business in terms of, the analytics. We have access to more insights from the data that maybe in the past we couldn't really make sense of. So we've had tons and tons of data that we now use to make better, insightful decisions. Or 3D printing, and maybe 4D and 5D, some of the other variations that are being touted. And things like even augmented reality, people are in rooms and they can actually feel like they're touching equipment on the site. And so it is here, and it must be planned for, it must be accounted for. And so in the industry, where are the ways in which we are seeing the impacts of digital? Some of those is, in the smart factory, there are sensors all over. You can sit at, in the control room more and more and be able to tell the health of some of those equipments. You can actually do condition-based monitoring rather than just, do maintenance all the time. You can actually tell from the actual state of your equipment based on digital enhancing that, for you. People use drones for inspections now. And so there's so many options. And so in case you're wondering why I have a picture of candies on the screen, it's an analogy for where we are today with technology. You almost feel like, why don't I have this in my business? Why are we not doing that in my company? Because it feels like a kid goes into a candy store and you want to just get everything because it's like you're in Wonderland. However, there's always limited funds, right? You can't get everything from the candy store. Otherwise, you're going to spend money and you might not even get the real one that you wanted. And that is why digital has to be thought about strategically. So that leads to my next slide. you know, there's the temptation, you know, we do a lot of best practices. Oh, I saw this somewhere and I want to practice it. I saw it, this is a good technology, it makes sense, you know, it makes work faster, or it makes us drill this well faster, or it makes us, you know, do whatever it is. But there's a risk, because digital must be customized to your business. There's a business to be run, right? At the end of the day, you know, we're not digital companies. We're companies that are being enhanced by digital. And so as a company, it's important that, you know, we don't just see digital as digital for digital's sake. You know, we just get it, and then after a few months or years, we abandon it, either because it's too costly to maintain, or it's really not delivering any incremental value for your specific context. And so, like I put on the screen, digital for digital's sake just does not work. The core business of the company must run. You know, it's a business after all, and so we must make money, right? And so whether it's in the drilling operations, or, you know, or it's in, you know, like me, facilities engineer, or it's in the petroleum engineer who is, you know, using digital to kind of make better, you know, reservoir management or production management, or whatever it is that you're using digital for. Ultimately, it needs to tie with the overall company strategy. And so that's why, and I bring this up because most times as engineers, you know, as core professionals, we just want to go do our things. And then you get frustrated when sometimes maybe funds don't get allocated to certain things, and you're wondering, this just makes sense. Why are we not doing it? It's either because the linkage, the business value linkage has not been established, or really it's just not aligned with the strategy of the company that you're in at the moment. And so one of the things I also try to highlight here is that there's a cost to technology adoption. Every time you make a change to either go with the latest version of a technology, you need people to run those systems. You need people to, but people need to learn it. And the technology itself is not cheap. And so, like the kid in the candy store, you can't have everything, even though you wanted to have everything. Hence the need for a strategic, you know, approach to technology adoption. You know, the other thing I have on that slide is the fact that just as soon as, for example, you all have phones out there, and I can almost bet that as soon as you buy that phone, you're beginning to hear that there's a replacement coming or is already out. And so if you go after technology just because of the sake of it, you're going to end up with, like, you know, a storehouse of technological equipment and innovation that is not really adding much to you. So hence, again, the need for strategy. And so I keep using the word strategy as a catch-all, and you start to wonder, what does it even mean? You know, for some people, you might want to be like, are you a first mover versus a follower? There are people who love to take risk. Their company strategy is to take risk. We try it out, we get the benefits of being the first mover in that technology, and we lead the competition in that strategy. Guess what? Not everybody wants to be a first mover, because despite the benefits of being a first mover, there might be risks that, you know, somewhat affect your operations in a certain way. And because of that, it might not make sense for you to be the first person trying it out because of the exposure in the industry, or maybe in the particular environment or community where your operations are in. And so the question is, you know, you need to think about what is the company strategy when you as a professional, you are proposing a digital solution, because it needs to line up. Another thing is around what really is that digital technology doing for you as a company. For some people, they know that they do very poorly in some aspects. Maybe they just don't have the skills for, you know, reading certain things, and they do need the technology to enhance their weaknesses. Or there's this area that we do great at, but we want to accelerate it. And so it might just, for example, even in the same industry, upstream, so maybe a Shell versus a Chevron versus an MPDC, our unique strategies are also different. Our core strengths are different based on our experiences, maybe in the kind of, you know, reservoirs that we've dealt with, or say even as a company, as some people go from like shallow water into deeper water. And so you need to be sure really what that strategy is when you think about how digital helps with that. And I'm spending a lot of time on this slide just so that, you know, we can really understand why it is important for you to think about strategically about your technology, because a lot of us are technological people. We know the bread and beans of the technology. We can Google it and think about, you know, how to code, how to write applications. But all of that makes no difference or is not important if it's not adding value to the business. And so I think about also, this technology is good. Do we want to own it internally, or we want to outsource that part and let the experts in it deal with every new version of that technology, but deliver the business to us? And so if your company is strong on outsourcing and you're trying to be the SME internally, you're going to be hitting a brick wall because it's not aligned with the strategy. And so that's some of the things that are important to a professional when you think about it. And so when you think about what are the digital goals of the company, so for some places it's the benefits that digital provides are so many. It could help you improve your productivity. So today, with all the low code, no code apps, people are trying to make work faster. So you have power apps for things that previously, you used Excel for. Not that Excel doesn't have its own firepower, but it could be to improve productivity. It could be to leverage insights. So you need more data. So production engineers, reservoir engineers are always looking for data. You want to be able to better characterize your reservoirs, understand what's happening down there. And so that could be your goal for digital. But what's most important really is understand the goal. Don't, like somebody says, don't get the hammer and be looking for a nail. Make sure you have a nail that you want to use the hammer for. And that's how technology should be addressed. So the slides will be shared, so I don't want to kind of cover it one by one. But one additional thing that digital does for us is safety. There's some places that traditionally it's getting harder and harder for human beings to be in. And so maybe a company strategy might be applying digital to strategy and to safety type things, getting people away from hazardous environments. But in the aspects of some of the efficiency things, they just don't want to go there. So it's important again that you understand the business and where the focus is. And this is not just for the professionals, it's even for the leadership of the business, because there's always the temptation to go try it out because your competitor is trying it out, but that may not work for you. So going to the next slide. This is one of my favorite slides, not just because it has my name on the slide, but it's something that I've been passionate about in recent times. I've always been concerned about how things connect together. What's the relationship between things? Can you still hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you from here.
Because I can kind of see a notification on my end that my microphone changed. So I'm just checking to be sure that you can still hear me audibly. All right. So system thinking, if you look at the picture on the right, and I ask you what exactly that picture is, everybody's just going to raise their hand and tell me it's a car. But if I picked up the system in its exploded view and I handed it over to you and I said to you, go ride this car, just put the parts, the tires, everything in a box and give it to you, you're not going anywhere in that car. And that's how system thinking really is. System thinking is about the fact that there are parts, there are connections between them. There's a function that you want to establish with that system. And more importantly, there's something unique about that system, when you bring it together, that you cannot get by just adding all the parts together. So again, let me use the example of my car. So my goal here really is to make things as simple as possible. And I'm hoping I'm achieving that. I may sound a bit too simple, but the goal is to make us understand it at the core. So like I said, think about the car. There's a unique behavior that comes when you put all the tires, and the bolts and the steering wheel and everything together. Now you can get in the car, it can move, it can accelerate. Now, if you put a tire and you just change one tire out of the 4, that something changes because you have now changed one part of the system. And the change is not just in the fact that the tire now wobbles, it's exponential to the point that you could have an accident because of the misalignment that has now happened because of that one tire. So that's how I want you to think about system and think about digital. In a system, the whole is more than the parts. And so what is system thinking? It's a holistic approach, that looks at interactions. When I put 2 of you in the room and I tie your hands together, I've created an interaction where Mr. A cannot move without Mr. B. If you try to move in opposite directions, there's either somebody's arm gets stretched or there's a wound. Then think about if I put water into that room and I tell you to now keep walking, that water creates an additional constraint that you need to think about when you design it. So for example, when I say 1 + 1 = 2 plus IX, I'm saying that as a system, when you bring parts together, you need to think about that additional thing that you have added by that interaction between 1 and 1. And then when you think about the context, like when I say pouring water on the floor, how that changes. So in your case, it might be you're in Nigeria, maybe in the location where you are, there's not enough infrastructure. And so a very great HoloLens technology that works in another location might be poor in your location because the context is wrong. And so if you think about digital, you must always think system, think about the interactions, think about the connections. So system thinking is a whole lecture for days, so I won't go into it, but it's just to help you think about, how this is important for digital, and technologies. And I know that we're coming up on time and I'm gradually moving towards the end of my slide. And so when we think about a systemic approach, how is this different from strategy? Strategy is, where do we want to go with all of this? There's some linkages, right? But with systemic approach, you're thinking about, scalability. If everyone in this room was given a project to go and write a Power Apps code, and 25 people went and wrote the code, and everyone is trying to solve the small pockets of problem, but you all have spent the same amount of time to write a code that you could have written one and then just layered on some additional modules, and you'll be able to solve a bigger problem. That is systemic approach, because when you think systemically, when you think about the interactions of your operations, your processes with another process, then you look out for opportunities for synergy, to scale this, to impact the value chain, to think about optimization. Sometimes you want to take a loss somewhere so that another part can gain. That's how you think about systems. Also, when you think about systemic impacts, when you make a decision about digital, for example, I want to introduce this new technology, but you are introducing the new technology to your core business secret. Have you thought about the cybersecurity threats? Have you thought about the back end, additional threat management that you need to do to that? Those are the kind of things that you need to do as a professional when you think about strategy and when you think about digital, rather. And it probably sounds like a lot, like, am I trying to solve the problem of the Middle East? But no, everybody sort of has their own corner of the world where this matters. I just gave you a very simplistic example of I tie two people together and I ask you to go and then I pour water on the ground. That might mean something for different people. So in your own space, think about the interactions. What are the connections? Who are the stakeholders? Who will get impacted by this technology I'm bringing? Because sometimes people introduce the best latest state-of-art technology, and nobody wants to use it because you're adding more work to their life. You're stressing them. And so if you don't think about that as somebody who is bringing technology to the business, you're going to have a lot of products that are like dead on arrival. So think exposures, think as a system. The world is getting more complex. There are more interactions. There are so many reasons why we should be much more conscious of the systemic interactions. And so I'll kind of go to my last slide, which is what's in it for you as a digital industry professional. And I've been touching on it as I've been coming along. So this is more like a recap slide. It is what adds the most value to your profession, or maybe to your company or to your department. What are your options? Because there's so many options and you cannot go into everything, But one thing that I think is very important is that you must build fluency in your business and in the domain. Otherwise, you're going to keep trying to introduce technology that does not help the core problems that you're facing in your domain. And so there's always going to be skills gap. Like I said, as one technology is coming out, there's another replacement. And so it's your choice to think about, where do I want to focus? There are some basic digital skills that will be a no-no if you don't have it. And so maybe the world is talking about low code, no code. Maybe you want to invest in that even as a basic minimum. Or you really want to be a specialized digital person in maybe petroleum, reservoir management, certain digital applications. But the risk, though, is the day that goes out of the fashion, you might be jobless, in quote. And so think about your options. There's so many options: that data analytics, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, machine learning. It's like I said, it's like a kid in the candy store. but know your options, know your interests, know what's important to your business, and don't just learn the technology. You must understand the concept behind it, because ultimately, when the technology changes, if the concept is true, all you need to do is learn a few more jargons or specialist things, but you're still relevant, to the organization and to the industry, as a whole. So lastly, so that I'll stop talking and take your questions, it is, when you think about digital, don't just think digital. Think about the what. Think about the why. Why is it important before you start thinking about the how? Because most times the how changes. What's more consistent is the what and the why, the strategy and the systemic impacts of digital. Think about, how do I add value, in my aspect of the value chain, or where do I even have to take some hits to add overall value to the chain? You need to understand what the strategy of your digital strategy is, what the company strategy is, what the industry's digital strategy is, and try to understand how they all fit in. How does the digital enhance the business? Like I said, don't get a hammer and be trying to find a nail. Instead, make sure that you truly have a nail that you need a hammer to hit in terms of your digital solutions. You must always think strategically. You must always think digitally. There are options, but the strategy is key and the interactions are key. And the last one is very important. Agility is key, because things change as you go. What was the top digital innovation last year is not the one this year. It's not going to be the one next year. And so you must stay agile enough to be relevant over the long haul as a digital professional, and even as a company that is putting digital, as part of their strategy. And so the last slide is just to say that, there are a few resources out there. I just put about 3 of them on the slide. They will be made available at some point. But again, I'm putting a plug. Please go to my website if you're interested in reading about some of the simple examples of life when it comes to like strategy. But beyond that, I would say make sure you grow your skills, understand your domain, and use digital to unlock value for your business. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions. That is my last slide.
Please, let's give a round of applause. Please, let's clap. Thank you very much, Adam, for your wonderful presentation of everything that she said. My major takeaway from it is that once a while ago, we were talking about coding, you have to learn coding, you have to learn coding. But right now, we are already transiting to a time of no code or no code at all. So that means things will keep changing, and we just have to be on our toes to be sure that we are not caught off guard. Thank you very much, Madam, for your wonderful presentation. So it's time for questions. I'm sure during the course of the presentation, we have questions. Please, if you do have questions, you find out the lift of hand, we'll give you the mic to ask the speaker. We'll also check on the chat. Please, if you have questions for the presenter, or you just have contributions to what she said to, you can as well.
Feel free to ask any questions, though. Or except if I either did a very great job explaining it to you, or I did a poor job and you're like, okay, let's just be done with this.
This let's present. Okay, so we are going to, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, the presenter. So I have this question. I don't know, since you're encouraged to ask any, I still want to throw some more light on this difference between the strategic approach and the systemic approach. To me, I'm not really, I think there's a thin line between them. My other question is that most oil fields are now looking at deploying this what we call these digital oil fields. From your wealth of experience, can you help us, can you tell us some of the challenges that one will encounter if one wants to implement this digital oil technology?
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So to your first question around systemic, systems versus strategic, you're right. There is a very strong correlation between strategy and business and system thinking. However, they're not exactly the same thing. So your strategy is that 1,000 foot look at where am I going with this? What's important to me as a business? Like I said, I gave you a couple of examples here around, what's our internal strategy, or in my department, so like how we in the beginning of the year, you set your strategic goals for the year or for the next 2-3 years or the next 4 years. You're thinking overall as it pertains to the business, what are my plans? And so when I think about digital from a strategic standpoint, it is, do we want to be the first mover, in this field? Do I want to be the first to say, like you said, a lot of people are going to digital oil field. Is that tied to our business, strategy for this location? Or do we have the overall capabilities to do it? How much is it going to cost us? Is it worth putting our efforts? What's the cost benefit ratio? How much more benefits do I get from doing this? Or what risk does it mitigate for me? Or do I even want to go into this by ourselves, or we want to just outsource this out and keep, our core business and let somebody else worry about it? What's our goal for strategy? Do we just want to, have a workforce that's fluent in strategy, or we want to focus on data? We want to get the most data out of the field that we have, or no, we want to accelerate some of our production in certain places because we find that we are consistently challenged with how quickly we're able to respond to some of our subsurface type issues. Those are the overall answers that you need to answer from a strategy standpoint when you're going after technology, because again, there's so many options to go through, and you might be answering the wrong question with the technology you're trying to adapt for your business. Now that's one side. The other aspect is system thinking. System thinking, like the example I gave with the car, where you change a tire on your car, and because you didn't quite think about the connections and the interactions, you suddenly realize that all of a sudden your car is jerking all over the place because you made a tiny change in your system. And so a system thinking, while it's linked to strategy, is more around interactions. What are the unique behaviors? If I improve this process in my function and then throw out a lot more output to another function that is not yet ready to take my input because they don't even have the capability or the resources to do it, then I'm creating a problem. Should I be applying it here? What are the implications of introducing this technology here? It's that consistent thinking about the connections and the risks that arise as a result of your connections. System thinking is about thinking about how can we scale this? And so there would always be those gray areas where those bubbles overlap. And that was why in treating this topic, I took them together, because it's a bit difficult to totally separate them, but the focus is slightly different. Now, in terms of the digital oil field, so I know that a lot of companies are, going into it. There's a lot of, technology being put into it. Like I said, some of the challenges with it generally is context. What are the infrastructure you have to ensure that, all the digitization, you're able to truly get the benefits out of it, the sensors you're putting in your field, the infrastructure to relate back to your whatever the control room or the tower where you are, where you want to use as the base of the operation is, all the things that you want to put in there. It might not be right for you as a company, maybe because the amount of resource that is required to do that may not be available, or the local context in which you find yourself means that sometimes people have cybersecurity threats. People are going to some platform to take off things from, the production equipment. Sometimes you don't get the information real time enough to make the decisions that you want to because there's some bigger issue with the infrastructure. And so I think that those are the things where you start to think about your unique contexts around the system to be sure that really it's appropriate, because while some people are doing well with it, even within the same company, it's working well in some fields and not working well in others because of the unique context issues that they have. And I don't know if that answers you, or you have more clarification that you would like to have.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's satisfied with your response. Thank you very much. So we invite some of us to question.
Sorry, I didn't catch what you said.
My response was satisfactory to me.
All right.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for this presentation. Great so far. My question goes this way. For technology, like you said,
I can hear you. I can hear you. You might need to come closer.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, please go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, as I said for technology, that technology is very specific and you have to find context for the technology. So my question goes this way. You know that with the advent of technology, by deployment of technology, most times this leads to reduction in the number of jobs for people. So what I'm asking is that in the context of Nigeria, for instance, now we have a lot of people who are without jobs and a lot of people who are out of jobs. How do you balance the deployment of technology?
So sorry to cut you, but I think somebody will have to echo it. I really can't catch it. I think the sound is a bit muffled.
Okay, my question basically is that how do we balance technology with job creation in a society like Nigeria where we have a lot of people out of jobs? Can you hear me?
James, I hear in a country like Nigeria, how do we, James, can you please echo the question? For some reason, and I can't see you, so I don't know what's happening, but I can't really hear him. So I hear in a country like Nigeria, but I didn't catch the other part of it.
Okay, ma. Can you hear me, ma?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so his question is, in a country like Nigeria, where we have a lot of people that are out of jobs, how do we balance technology adoption with job creation?
All right, so jobs and technology in a place where there are so many people that are out, there's always that perspective where people say that technology takes away those jobs. One of the things I put in there is that there will always be jobs because there's a skill gap. They're going to need somebody who has certain skills. There are companies who are looking for people who are good in low code, no code to complement the staff that they have. So even though some people don't have the jobs, some people are getting jobs because some of the jobs of the future do not exist today. Some of the jobs we have today didn't exist last year. And that's where, as a professional, you need to really study the industry. Where is it going? Study what's happening in other places. What can potentially be coming to our country that I can start learning about? Because, unfortunately, it's a blessing and a curse. There's so much opportunities on the internet for you to read things free of charge. In fact, there's information overload now. So you need to be able to really drill down on what might be important and, dare to take a risk. So there's going to be people that are going to continue to not have jobs because certain skills are going to be outdated because you're going into technology. But guess what? There'll be new skills that people will be willing to pay a premium for because very few people know it. Unfortunately, most people will now start learning that skill. By the time they become mainstream, they've moved on to the next thing. And that's why some of these kind of conversations are important, so that you can think ahead. And I said it, understand the business, understand your domain, understand where are the problems that they typically tend to have, say maybe in production, in reservoir, in drilling. Just from reading, it's available. Where do I think I might be able to learn about while staying relevant today, also keeping an eye on the future? Because the problem is here. Yes, we don't have jobs and there's technology coming, but there's going to be jobs for those who are relevant for the evolving industry. I don't know if it might not be a pleasant answer, but I hope it answers your question.
Yes, ma'am. It's satisfied with your response. So we invite Jeffrey, please.
Thank you very much for such a wonderful presentation. My question is very similar to what Olawale asked on the chat box. Yeah, so basically, when it comes to for corporations, when it comes to the their method or their methodology for adopting technology, that decision usually comes from the decision makers as top management. Their strategic approach to like adopting new technologies, whether they're first movers or whatever, usually comes from decision makers. So my question is, as young professionals, how can we drive digitalization? Apart from you just seeing something and speaking up, are there other ways from experience that you can try? Let's say you have a brilliant idea of your end and you want to try, and you're not a decision maker. How do you drive it?
Okay, so I think I got. Are you still asking?
Yes, I have one other question, and that's still based on what someone just asked. How do you bridge the gap where adoption of new technologies make a workforce obsolete? My previous job, we had a very similar situation where we had this fantastic technology, we had robots that could do some certain things. But when they looked at the amount of people who have to lay off for that technology, top management was like, no, we don't want that technology. What if you have a technology that in your company, your industry, and you know it's going to affect the workforce, it's going to make some people redundant? How do you balance it?
So I think I heard most of it, like it's related to the last one, but how do you balance it when it might impact the most of your workforce? So I would answer that. So I like having very candid conversation, because the goal of this is for us to learn and to see how it can impact us. So the first question around, most times the decisions don't filter down to like the young professionals, as in, so how do you help drive or lead digital? And I think that, I had a session recently with somebody and I talked about leading as an influencer, because, we've been taught that, you have to be a leader to lead, as in you have to have positional authority. But sometimes just leveraging some of the things I've shared today, understanding your business, understanding the pain points, and then understanding the technology options might help you be able to make a case to the influencer that you have access to say, so we keep having these issues in some of our, production, our reports. We have challenges with running the data. It takes hours to run the simulations all the time, and it delays the decision that ultimately means that we sometimes lose out on some opportunities. You've made a linkage as to why there is a problem that you want to solve. Also, however, I hear that there's this technology available that can solve it. It's not going to happen on the first day, so I make it sound very simple. But you've sown a seed of, technology options to solve a business need, because at the end of the day, it's a business, and your ability to understand the domain enough to be able to say, we see that this can address this problem. You're making your manager's life easier if he can solve that problem. Now, the fund is not abundant, and there will always be those trade-offs around what can we spend money on now today versus tomorrow. But you have to keep at it. Some of the sessions are part of those things where you enlighten yourself, understand the pain points, understand the technology, understand the options, and explain it in a way that they understand what's in it for the business. Because that's where most people miss it, that communication part. So I think, we can go on and on about that, but if you look at some of the things I talked about in thinking about your strategy and your business, it helps address some of that. The second part for me is, so you keep influencing the influencer. That's what I'll tell you. The second one is around the impact on jobs versus, technology. And, some companies, and that's why I said it's tied to your company strategy. There's some companies who are like, we want to keep our employees happy. We like employee experience, we want to do all of that. But they can only do that as long as they are in business. And so if they cannot stay competitive, it'll be a challenge to keep, addressing the employees. That's just the truth about it. They have to stay in business to keep the employees going. Now, should you take technology and just drop employees? I'm not an advocate for that. I think it's a balanced approach, because technology cannot run everything. You need people. Even when you talk to the core technologists, they tell you that even when you write a code, you're doing machine learning, you need somebody to be able to test that, even the interpretations you're getting out of this is relevant to your context. And that's why it comes back to that conversation about having the skills that are relevant for the workforce or your profession of the future. We can all sit and hold hands and say, oh no, we don't want change to happen, but it's going to happen. It's either your company gets left behind and everybody else moves on, or the company moves on and leaves whoever doesn't want to go behind. It's a hard truth, but I'm saying it like this just so that people can think about it and understand that ultimately it's a business. And so you must make sure that you're arming yourself with the right information to stay relevant to your career, the industry, it's a whole chain. And you might not be in the upstream or a particular industry. It might be that, okay, now you want to move on to another industry. But the ability to have those transferable skills, I think, are very important because that keeps you relevant for the future, for the company of the future.
Thank you.
I hope that answers it.
Yes, ma'am. The response was suitable for the question. So we'll invite someone in virtual who is willing to ask his question. You can see his hand is raised up. Good news, please go ahead to unmute yourself and ask the question. Okay, then while he's here to do so, we'll just take one question from the chat box. So Olawale Ajayi asked,
yeah, so I think it was related to the last one around, in delivering value to the
delivering
business,
value
how
to the
best.
business, how best can we, as young professionals, do the efforts towards that digitalization? I think that question has already been answered. Okay, thank you very much for your response, madam. We really appreciate your time. So just stick with us and we will close in very soon. So at this moment, I'm sure each and every one of us have been blessed with our lunch. So we'll go ahead to the